Test.
Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We've got a lot to talk about on today's podcast, namely college football. The state of Indiana has taken the college football world by storm. I know B. Scott probably wouldn't like the background that we have on the podcast right now because it's IU after their...
Oh,
well,
I thought you were talking about your background. I was like, your background's just a football field.
Yeah, my background just says Big Ten, but if you go to the Facebook page right now, you'll see I've got the IU Hoosiers after their big win over Michigan on the screen behind us. So yeah, it's the state of Indiana is doing well in college football. We've got some things that we're not going to talk about this week, but some other things of note. We've got a date for the NBA season, rankings for college basketball. It's sports are getting back into kind of a normal type of schedule, and it's exciting to see.
Thank goodness. I love the college basketball rankings came out because that just shows you that we are getting back to some normalcy.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of stuff has come full circle because obviously it was the end of college basketball season when all this sort of began during, right before the NCAA tournament. And so now that it is, time for college basketball again, it's kind of interesting to kind of look back at where we're then, look up till now. Obviously a lot has changed. It's been this year has been the longest 5 years of my life, I feel like, but it's been really crazy.
Well, hey, it's kind of like this. God said to his intern, hey, did you make sure to get all of the events for the 2020s all set up? And the intern said, wait, you wanted all those historical events to go over a course of 10 years and not just 2020? And God said, yeah, of course. Why? What did you do? Intern, oh, nothing.
Yeah, no, don't even worry about it. Oh man. Well, one crazy thing about this year has been the college football, as we mentioned, the state of Indiana, basketball state, taking the college football world by storm. And they're playing a big role on the landscape. Let's jump right in here with Notre Dame, who is now number 2 in the country. They knock off Clemson. The Irish had a 23-13 lead at halftime. Davis Allen had a touchdown catch, which tied the game at 23 for the Tigers heading into the fourth quarter. We went to overtime, tied at 33. A Kyron Williams touchdown, his third of the game, gave the Irish a 47-40 lead in the second overtime, and then Clemson turned it over on downs to clinch the game for the Irish. Ian Book had 310 passing yards for Notre Dame with a touchdown, and then Williams 140 yards and 3 touchdowns. The offense was rolling for the Irish. DJ Wegalule for the Clemson Tigers obviously was playing in relief of Trevor Lawrence, who was out due to COVID protocols. He threw for 439 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, 1 on the ground. And so it was really a wild game, to sit back and watch. You kind of expected it to be closer, especially after Clemson went out against Boston College and trailed for a lot of that game and had to rally to come back. Obviously, I don't know if you really want to put an asterisk next to this win for Notre Dame because of the fact that Clemson didn't have Trevor Lawrence, but
an asterisk. You can't put an asterisk just on next to one game.
Well, right, but also just the fact that, my main reaction is that, hey, it's the same reaction that you have a lot of times in the Peyton Tom Brady debate, which is, hey, Peyton couldn't play defense. Hey, Trevor doesn't play defense. And Trevor...
You're right. Trevor Lawrence does not play defense, but the one thing you did not put in that rundown there is it wasn't just Trevor Lawrence that was out on COVID protocols. It was also, there were several key defensive players for Clemson that were out as well. And that really was probably the bigger factor in it. I don't think missing Trevor Lawrence ended up being the big factor for this, but missing some of those key defensive pieces out with the same issues. I don't know if they've had COVID or if they were part of the contact tracing protocol or what it may be. I don't know who they were, but watching the broadcast, Tony Dungy did mention, he said, hey, look, it's not just Trevor Lawrence that's out. There are a few key defensive pieces that are out too to COVID protocol. So I think that was the bigger factor in this. I'm not going to take anything away from Notre Dame. Notre Dame did a heck of a job. I mean, first and foremost, they shut down a Heisman Trophy candidate in Travis Etienne. I mean, he was tearing the entire country up earlier, and then he looked normal to me in this game. Notre Dame did a very good job shutting him down.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at with the Trevor Lawrence thing is that I think having Trevor Lawrence, even with those defensive players out, would have been the difference in the game. Yeah. But at the same time, Trevor Lawrence obviously would have helped out, and it's a different game if Lawrence plays just in general because of the fact that obviously the offense has a little bit more swagger behind it, a little bit more firepower behind it, and so maybe Notre Dame doesn't get out to a 10-point lead early and all that kind of stuff. So it's crazy how the game played out, but it was just, I mean, Clemson. I mean, not to say that their obviously they're key defensive players for a reason, but I feel like obviously the most important position on the field is quarterback, but the fact that hey, this Notre Dame offense, who we didn't think going into the season that Notre Dame was going to have a chance against Clemson. I know when we did our preview, I said that, hey, if Clemson had gone to Notre Dame and Notre Dame had a packed house, which it was more full than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, they did a very good job of spreading those fans out to make them look there was more than there really were.
Until the very end, when the whole entire stadium rushed the field.
It looked like they opened the gates and let the entire campus in. I'm like, hold up, wait a second. That looks like a packed house storming the field, not a pared down crowd. I mean, it must have been everybody in the stadium stormed the field, including the grandparents.
Right, and so I definitely... this was a game where I thought that Notre Dame had a chance to kind of hang in there, but I thought ultimately, hey, Clemson's going to prevail, and I think that, hey, you know what, you could. I think the bigger asterisk when you look at this game, if you were going to put one on there, which we're not, would be, hey, Notre Dame beat Clemson without Trevor Lawrence, but that's kind of my point there. Trevor Lawrence doesn't play defense, even though they're missing some key defensive players as well. I think the bigger headline is Trevor Lawrence was out, and I mean, Notre Dame now in a pretty good position. They finished with 3 of 4 games on the road, but they don't have any more games against ranked opponents, so they control their destiny to the ACC title game. If they can find a way to win out and win these last 4 games, I mean, they will play Clemson. And what's crazy, and we'll get to it more later on in Hot or Cold, but I mean, they might now control their destiny to the college football playoff, even as long as they don't lose before losing to possibly Clemson in the ACC title game.
Yeah, hold on. I'm taking a look here to see what their upcoming schedule looks like.
It's they're at Boston College next week. Then the following week they're at North Carolina, and then
if there is a game on this schedule that could potentially trip them up, look for it to be that game at North Carolina. North Carolina at one point this season was a top 10 team. They only have 2 losses on the season. Now, one of them, yes, was to Florida State.
And Virginia. They just lost to Virginia.
Yeah. But that could be an interesting game because I do believe North Carolina's 2 losses did come on the road. Hold on. I'm pulling it up. Yes. Their 2 losses came on the road. They have been a very good team at home. So... I mean, that could be one to really look at for Notre Dame, especially if Notre Dame ends up having a game like they did against, Louisville. I mean, 12-7. That was just a few weeks ago. Or let's see, Duke. I mean, they only beat Duke by 2 touchdowns, and Duke is 2-5.
Also a basketball school.
Oh, hey, Duke was a bowl team last year. They were a 7-win team last year. So, I mean, don't sleep on Duke typically. But, Notre Dame does have the tendency, it seems like, to play to their opponent's level. Or sometimes they just kind of, I don't know, sleep on an opponent. I don't really want to say that because that's not it, but I have a feeling, they had all season long, they had this game against Clemson circled on their calendar. They knew this game was a make or break game for their season. First and foremost, it was also a revenge game because the last time Notre Dame made it into the college football playoff, they got absolutely trounced by Clemson. And I believe Trevor Lawrence was the quarterback at the time. I believe. I may not be 100% right on that. It may have been.
It was only like 2 years ago, so yeah, it was Trevor Lawrence.
Okay, so Trevor Lawrence. So there was a bit of a revenge game there as well. So yeah, that's why I'm looking at that Notre Dame UNC game really hard and thinking if there is a game on their remaining schedule outside of the ACC championship, it could be that North Carolina game. Now, that game's not going to play spoiler whatsoever in stopping Notre Dame versus Clemson again. To be honest, that's not going to happen. North Carolina doesn't even play Clemson, so that's good. I guarantee we're going to see Notre Dame and Clemson again here in a few weeks in the middle of December for the ACC championship. And I have a feeling it's going to be a different outcome at that point in time, as long as, no COVID situations. I could see us having a COVID outbreak at Notre Dame here in about a week. But, it was a great game. I think it was a perfect game, to be honest. It was exactly what college football needed this year. It needed a top flight matchup under the lights during a tough time, whether it be COVID or a presidential election, whatever it may be. This was the perfect distraction for everybody. And whether you are a Notre Dame fan or not, whether you're a Clemson fan or not, if you're just a fan of good football, this was the game for you, regardless.
It really was. It was a very fun game to watch, and Notre Dame gets the big win over Clemson. So we'll see what happens. Clemson now drops to number 4, and Notre Dame is number 2. So it doesn't stop there, though. For
the reversible jacket fans are so confused right now. I'm just going to say that. The reversed jacket fans are so confused. I mean, their jackets are getting good workouts, and it's not even basketball season yet.
Yeah,
they're going to have to take that thing to the tailor and get the inseams fixed because they're just burning right through that jacket.
They don't know what's happening right now. It's DEFCON 5. IU knocks off Michigan for the first time since 1987. Now the Hoosiers are now ranked at number 10, and it's football. It's not even bad. We talked about the college basketball rank. Oh yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's.
I'll get to my reaction on not just on the game, but on the ranking.
Yeah. But the Hoosiers dominated from the beginning. They led 24-7 at halftime, 31-14 after the third. Michael Penix Jr. had a career day, 342 yards and 3 touchdowns. Stevie Scott III had 97 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Ty Freifogel had 7 catches for 142 yards and a touchdown. The Indiana Hoosiers have now put themselves in a great position for, a fantastic opportunity against the Ohio State Buckeyes. I know I'm stopping short of saying what I'm eventually going to say later on in the podcast about that matchup, but I mean,
when I got this rundown, I wanted to come through the computer and slap you.
So here's my thoughts on it. For one, I think the Hoosiers may be for real. I mean, now it depends on what your definition of for real means. Do we mean for real, as far as the national, title, prospectus is concerned? Probably not. But they may be for real for the Big Ten, because they're averaging 37 points per game, which is third in the Big Ten. I mean, technically, their defense should be third. They're fourth because Wisconsin's only played one game. So there's no sort on that kind of thing. There's no minimum for that. They are fourth in the Big Ten in points and yards allowed per game, and their one Big Ten test left in 2 weeks is against Ohio State. And honestly, there's
another one on that schedule.
Well, they do play Wisconsin,
but not even Wisconsin. I'm not even talking about Wisconsin.
I mean, naturally, you're going to say the Purdue game, but I mean,
no.
Wait, so who's even in there?
I'm saying Maryland. Have you seen that team ever since they put Tagovailoa as they put him into starting quarterback?
No, I honestly haven't. But
totally different team than what came out week 1 and got trounced by Northwestern. Maryland is actually a very decent team. I mean, this is a team that has, since they've done that, they have thumped Minnesota. They have thumped Penn State.
Well, to be fair, Minnesota also got thumped by a Michigan team that is bad. They also got they also Penn State is bad. They lost to this IU team. As far as that's concerned,
controversial,
right? But I'm just saying that saying that they've beaten those two teams
on this Indiana team too. Then,
well, no, I just think yes. So here's
what I'm getting at is Maryland is not a bad football team like we all thought they were going to be this year. They are. I mean, they started off that way, but then they made the switch at quarterback, and it really has been a night and day difference. And when you look at how the Big Ten East is playing out right now, Maryland is playing like the third best team in that division. So that's why I'm saying Indiana still has it's going to be a challenge for Indiana because Maryland's playing a lot better. Now, ultimately, will Indiana prevail? Possibly, but all I'm saying is that Maryland is a lot better than people are giving them credit for.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is that here in a couple of weeks, the Hoosiers are going to go to Ohio State. There's going to be no fans there, so it's not going to be the same ruckus environment that they're used to. I mean, who knows what Wisconsin's situation is? Maybe they'll be back on track. Maybe they won't be in a couple of weeks.
They are scheduled to play at Michigan this weekend, and they say the game is on.
Right. So we'll see what happens there. But, I mean, if you really want to look at it, I just got really one more big test. I know you disagree. You think the Maryland game, you think they basically have a gauntlet the rest of the season. I think there's a chance.
Oh, gosh, no. No.
If they get... I mean, they only have to get up for one big game now. They would have to play Penn State, who's a buzzsaw. They'd have to play Michigan, that's a buzzsaw. They'd have to play Ohio State, that's a buzzsaw. Now they really got one of that three-headed monster to go, and they've won the first two. Is what I'm basically getting at. I think that they are now in a position to possibly get up for that one game, kind of like what Purdue did a few years ago against Ohio State.
Yeah, but that game for Purdue against Ohio State, that was more than a game. One,
right.
The raucous environment. 2, the Tyler Trent story and everything. That was more than a game. So that's why Purdue got up for that one. I think if you played that game 10 times, Purdue loses that game that year 9 times.
All I'm saying is I think IU can get up for one more big game against one of the teams that always seems to have always has their number, not seems. They always have their number. And in a year where Ohio State doesn't have any fans in the stands, I mean, college sports is the only sport, area of sports where there actually is a home field advantage. Yes, there are select pro environments that have home, field or home court advantage. Oklahoma, Pittsburgh, Seattle in football, Oklahoma City in basketball, especially at the beginning when they had Durant, Harden, and Westbrook. But
Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto. So, but it's not every single. I don't even know if there's really a place in baseball that you can say I don't want to go play there. Fenway, yeah, that's a good argument. Maybe Yankee Stadium, but the point is that in college sports there is always going on the road is a bigger test. Having a home field advantage is a bigger thing, and I think that the fact that they won't really have that, IU won't, Ohio State won't. That may level the playing field a little bit and allow IU, who already is riding high, they're number 10. Now, granted, you'd want to talk about the rankings. I agree with you that it's too high, but at the same time, I also think it's the politics and the marketing that college football does every year, where they're it's the same reason why UConn, when they played Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, got just thrown a 22nd ranking in the country just so they could say, hey, it's a ranked versus ranked matchup. They could say, hey, you know what? We're going to rank IU at number 10, even though we may not believe it, because it won't matter here in a couple weeks if they lose to Ohio State.
In a couple weeks, the way things are going for other top 10 teams, this could very well be a top 5 matchup, but really only one of the teams being a top 5 team. The one thing, I understand your argument about the home field advantage and not having that this year. You do slightly have it because you're not having to go on the road. You're sleeping in your bed. You're in your comfort zone. You still have that. You know, you just don't have the crowd environment behind you, which is a big deal, especially in the Big Ten. So I understand your argument there. But the one thing you're not taking into consideration is that this Ohio State team is playing at a totally different level than anybody else in the Big Ten or possibly right now even in the country. This is a team that's on a mission. Literally, they are on a mission. Justin Fields has been quoted as saying he is like basically the COVID police for his team and making sure none of his teammates are going out to parties, making sure none of them are putting themselves in situations where they may contract COVID or be in contact with somebody that may contract COVID and have to sit out for contact tracing. This team saw how close they were to making the national championship game last year and how they came up short and what mistakes they made. And they have gone this offseason, and they are trying to fix those problems so that way they can reach their ultimate goal of making the national championship game and winning a national title. And it is actually showing on the football field. I mean, this Indiana team, they finally had a truly good offensive game against Michigan. What we are seeing, though, is Michigan's defense is horrible. And that's not to take anything away from IU because IU is playing very well. IU is playing much better this year than they have ever played before. They have a very talented team. I do believe that they are a top 2, top 3 team, not just in the Big Ten East, but possibly in the Big Ten. But as you stated earlier, Penn State is horrible. Rutgers is Rutgers. Michigan is turning out to be horrible. I mean, Michigan thumped Minnesota. Well, like you said, Minnesota is not too good this year either. Their one win is to Illinois. And then Michigan turned around and got beat soundly at home by rival Michigan State, who turned around and got beat soundly on the road by unbeaten or winless Iowa. So, I mean, yeah, it is a topsy-turvy kind of season, yes. But IU has not faced the type of talent that we all thought they were going to face through these first 3 games with Penn State and Michigan. Not to take anything away from IU because, you know what? You play the games that are in front of you. You play that team that's in front of you. No matter how good or how bad they are, you have to take care of business, and they've taken care of business. Whether or not we want to believe that they really, truly took care of business against Penn State, that's what's done is done. That's a W for them. Good. Move on. But they have not faced the kind of talent that they will face against in Ohio State. Like I said, Ohio State is just playing at a totally different level this year than anybody else, not just in the Big Ten, but I feel like right now in the entire country, especially after what we saw from Notre Dame and Clemson. And, you know, Alabama's playing very well, but that's expected from Alabama. But, you know, they lost Jalen Waddle for the season due to an injury. That's a big piece there. So this Ohio State team, like I said, they're on a mission, and I don't think anybody's going to get in their way. Honestly, I feel like it's everybody else in the Big Ten is trying to play for runner-up in their division or you know, runner-up in the East and second place in the Big Ten if you're from the West. Because truth be told, this Ohio State team is a different animal, and I don't care how highly ranked IU will be come that Ohio State game. First off, about this ranking, I'm sorry. Yes, they beat number 8 Penn State, but as we all have seen, Penn State, it was nowhere near being deserving of that number 8 ranking. Penn State is very much like one of those teams that consistently gets ranked high just because of their name. For some reason, we have that a lot of that in college football, more so in college football, I believe, than in basketball. But that win alone got IU like pretty much catapulted up much higher than they probably should have been. Like I said, I don't want to take anything away from IU because they are a good football team. They are playing good football. They are one of the better teams in the Big Ten. Are they a top 10 team? When you look at the rest of the top 25, no, IU is not a top 10 team. I think anybody that has watched any amount of football can agree with that. I mean, it's just the way the rankings have fallen this year has really worked out in IU's favor, and that is what it is. But I don't think they're a top 10 team. And unfortunately, when you look at what IU has prior to playing Ohio State, it is very, very well could be IU is right around the top 5, potentially with what other teams in the top 5 have left in those next few weeks. And we could be looking at a top 5 matchup that ends up being on paper absolutely lopsided and propels Ohio State to number 1 in the country, just because it's number 1 just completely destroyed the 5th ranked team or Ohio State just destroyed the 5th ranked team in the country. But like I said, I don't want to take anything away from IU. I know I'm a Purdue fan, and I can respect when a team is playing very, very well, and they are playing very, very well. I just don't think they're deserving of being in the top 10 very well.
And I think, like I said, I think it's a manifest of it. For one, I think it's the wow factor of nobody expected IU to be this good. And so the fact they beat a number 8 team, we didn't know how bad Penn State was going to end up being. So when they beat a number 8 team, when I looked into where this IU team was before the season, they were middling around like the 40s as far as where they were ranked. So I know that still doesn't justify, basically, because like their ascent is basically as if they were ranked 25th and then beat one team that was highly ranked and then went up to like 2nd. So the rise to ascent was a little much, but I think it's also the wow factor of like, oh, this Notre Dame team, this IU team was able to do something that we didn't expect, so they get up there. It's the shortened season aspect of it as well, like, because how do you quantify one big win? Like, if there was 2 big wins back to back, or a medium sized win and then a big win, then you could justify putting them up at 17. But I think it's that factor too, where hey, if somebody surprises us and has a big win over a highly ranked team, where does that put them?
Especially a win on a controversial ending.
So then and then beating Michigan again, it's still kind of that wow factor of them getting that win. And like I said, I think a lot of it too is the fact that obviously, especially this season, we can't shy away from the fact that I'm sure they're like, hey, you know what? If we make IU number 10, we could potentially have a top 10 matchup when they play Ohio State, and that will get a lot of ratings, and we can advertise that, and we can, pump that up a lot, throughout the course of the week. So I'm sure that also plays a factor, because really, honestly, the only rankings that matter at the end of the day are the college football playoff rankings, and and by that point in time, we will know if IU is for real or not. I'm only making the case as far as saying they're for real in the sense that, like, I think that now in the position that they're in, not because we see it every weekend in the NFL where there's not a true home field advantage. I mean, there is, but there isn't. You know what I mean? It's a different atmosphere at the pro level than at the college level. Home field advantage means more at the college level. Not having that evens the playing field a little bit for IU. And if IU has to get up for one game that they think could potentially define their season against Ohio State. I mean, no matter how good Ohio State is, I mean, anybody can beat, anybody, especially if IU gets off to a good start and thinks that, hey, you know what, has that little bit of confidence that, hey, we beat Penn State, hey, we beat Michigan, no matter how good or bad they are. That's the kind of the three-headed monster of the Big Ten that seems to always, have IU's number. They get up for that one game and they manage to win it. I mean, they're sitting pretty, and they could potentially be in a good position to make the college football playoff even. So,
oh gosh, let's not go there. Let's not go there. First round matchup: Indiana and Alabama.
So, but here,
IU fans, you got what you wanted. You've been saying we want Bama.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too. I think I was going to get into it a little bit later, but again, I think this is the hill I'm going to die on this year. This year should have been the year we had 8 teams in the college football playoff, because a year like this is making the case as to why you need more teams available. Because, yeah, I mean, when you're literally sitting there, because, I mean, honestly, at this point, we're just sitting here, like, we know who the 3 teams are really that have a shot, a realistic shot. As it stands right now of winning the national championship, it's Alabama, it's Clemson, it's Ohio State. Maybe there's another team that can surprise us, but right now there's nobody from the highest ranked Big 12 team is 14th. The highest ranked Pac-12 team is 10th. So there's a very slim chance that either of those conferences get in. So right now, there's no way that the SEC East winner is going, or the SEC East winner is going to be, picked to be the 4 seed, or really realistically the 3 seed, because of the fact that they're gonna lose to Alabama and have 2 losses.
I don't know.
You think you want Florida over Bama?
I do. I mean, ooh. Florida in that game against Georgia. I know Georgia doesn't really have a quarterback, but wow.
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect it to be a 20-point win.
If the Colts want to pick I know I'm going off topic here a little bit, but if the Colts want to pick a quarterback in the first round of the draft and Kyle Trask is sitting there, I am all for selecting Kyle Trask. That guy can read the field and can sling it around. Whoa. That's all I have to say about that.
I mean, you never know. But yeah, I mean, in that scenario, though, if, let's say, because, I mean, obviously, if Florida beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, then, yes, it's going to be Florida and it's going to be Florida and Alabama, and then Ohio State and Clemson, realistically, or, Ohio State, Notre Dame, take those teams, as you will. But, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, as it stands right now, if we're picking the 4 seed, we're literally discussing, who do we throw up against Alabama to get beat up by 50 points, and at the end of the day, that's why we need more teams in the college football playoff, because, I mean, yes, that we would still be talking about that, but for the 8th seed, and then it would just get tougher from there, be on neutral sites, etc. But whatever, but that's what I think what would be the benefit of that. Now, we did have a game canceled this weekend, a game we were really excited for, a game we pumped up a little bit. That was the Wisconsin-Purdue matchup. That game was canceled. The Boilermakers do face number 23 Northwestern this week at home. The Wildcats are undefeated, so that's going to be a pretty interesting matchup, B. Scott.
Yeah, I love it. It's going to be under the lights. It is the Big Ten Network primetime game, 7:30 kickoff. There are rumors that Rondale Moore is set to make his season debut. He was actually potentially set to make his debut against Wisconsin because that game got canceled. He's pushed it back to this week. So that could cause some nightmares for Northwestern, especially if you have to, you're going in game planning for just having to guard David Bell and Milton Wright. And then all of a sudden now you're throwing in the fact that Rondale Moore is back. But the biggest key to watch in this game this weekend is whether Purdue defensive end George Karlaftis is healthy enough to go. He left the game against Illinois with an injury. Jeff Brom does not share very much injury info unless it's telling us today that offensive lineman Cam Craig is out for the season. Otherwise, he just says, we're working hard at rehabbing them and trying to get them healthy, and we'll see if they're good to go. He's like the Bill Belichick of injury reports.
We're on Northwestern.
Yeah, but this game, this is very similar to the game we saw 2 years ago on opening night. It really played a role in deciding who was going to represent the Big Ten West ultimately in Indianapolis. Ultimately, Northwestern ended up winning the Big Ten West that season. But both teams are sitting at undefeated, and for Purdue, not having that Wisconsin game kind of puts them at an advantage, but also at a disadvantage, because they are going to have one less game on their schedule. But you beat Northwestern. Northwestern still has games against Wisconsin. They still have some big games left on their schedule. So there is a true opportunity here for Purdue to really really position themselves to be able to represent the Big Ten West in the Big Ten championship game. If not, second or third place in the Big Ten West is still up for grabs at that point as well. I mean, when you look at Purdue's remaining schedule, you have Rutgers, Minnesota, Nebraska, and IU. I didn't say that in any particular order, but they're very winnable games except for maybe the IU game. Purdue should be favored in all of those but against IU. That is down in Bloomington as well. But, I think if you would have told me at this point in the season that Purdue had a game, this game would basically almost determine who's going to that Purdue could represent the Big Ten West, I may have laughed at you. I would have loved to have heard that, but I would at the same time been like, let's be realistic. I mean, who would have thought that the Wisconsin game was going to get canceled? I love the fact, though, that Wisconsin is now saying, oh, we're all good to go. We can play Michigan because our number one quarterback is out of COVID protocol and, he's allowed to play. And, oh, man, that Michigan team looks really bad. So, yeah, let's go take it to them in the big house. Whereas, that Purdue game would have been a tough one with our fourth string quarterback having to play. So that's kind of interesting. But, I'm really excited for this game. I think this is, that game a couple of years ago against Ohio State and Purdue, that was a big game, but for other reasons. This is probably the first true game that Purdue has had at Ross-Ade, I want to say since Wisconsin versus Purdue in 2004, of actual meaning, where the outcome of this game is truly going to potentially define the rest of your season and where you ultimately end up. Win this game and you actually have a full game lead on the rest of the Big Ten West, mostly Northwestern, going into the final stretch of your season. And I think that puts Purdue in a really strong position. So this is probably one of the biggest games in the last decade for Purdue.
Well, before we get into hot and cold, let's go ahead and get this word from Anchor. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place. So let's go ahead and hop into hot or cold. We've got 3 questions here. First question is going to be beating Clemson makes Notre Dame a college football contender. I think that's a hot take. The Irish won't face another ranked opponent until the ACC championship game, likely against Clemson. So what that does is it puts them basically in the driver's seat. If they go to the ACC championship game as a undefeated ACC team, and then even if they lose to Clemson in the ACC title game, their one loss will be to a team that was likely, not only was the ACC champion, but also a team that was ranked in the top 5. Notre Dame will likely still obviously be ranked at number 2, probably will slip to number 3 at that point. As Ohio State kind of rises through the ranks, if they do indeed do so. So Notre Dame will have a chance to say, hey, we beat the team that we lost to in the ACC championship game. And so, if we're looking for a 4th team to potentially get in, I think Notre Dame's now in a pretty good spot to do just that. I know that obviously, North Carolina is going to be a big game. Boston College is going to be a big game. Then they have Wake Forest and Virginia Tech, I think, or either Wake Forest and Virginia Tech, something like that. I think the rest of the games are for the Irish. But the Irish are in a good position to potentially run the table the rest of the season. And again, like you talked about before, the highest ranked Pac-12 team is Oregon at number 10. The Big 12 has number 14 Oklahoma State. So it's likely just going to be three conferences: the ACC, SEC, and Big 10. And again, I think it's going to be a situation where, I mean, if you're looking for that fourth team to get in, besides, obviously ACC champions in, SEC champions in, Big Ten champion, as long as it's Ohio State, they get in. The way it seems like, at least. So you're looking at a situation where, okay, so do you put in two ACC teams, even if the other ACC team is Notre Dame? I think the College Football Playoff Committee probably won't look at it that way. I think they'll still see Notre Dame as being Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame honestly really isn't playing that much of a difference in what their schedule would have normally been. It's just a matter of, they would have played a few less ACC games, and I don't know if the Clemson was on the schedule for this year or not. But Notre Dame's now in a very good position to possibly go ahead and make the college football playoff if they go ahead and run the table the rest of the year, because they will have beaten the only team they lost to, which is obviously one of the things that the committee looks for. Now, obviously, they look for it in reverse order. They want you to beat the team that you lost to for the title game to kind of erase that loss, but it's still going to be a loss to a top 5 team, and Notre Dame obviously ranked at number 2. I don't see how you drop them if let's say they're number 3, even if they lose to Clemson, who's number 4, or Clemson, who's number 5, wherever Clemson's at. I don't see how you drop them out of the top 4 for losing to Clemson.
Yeah, I think I agree. This is a hot take. Notre Dame is in a very strong position right now to make the college football playoff. Because even if they do lose to Clemson, I don't think you're going to leave out a one-loss Notre Dame team, considering their one loss was to a team they already had beaten, and it was also a top 4 team as well. The only thing that could stand in the way of Notre Dame making it in if they lose to Clemson in the ACC championship game is if Florida beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, because I do not believe there's any way that a one-loss Alabama team is going to be left out of the college football playoff. Obviously, you are going to put in the SEC champ, whether that's Alabama or Florida or Texas A&M. At this, we still don't know if it's going to be Florida or A&M. Wait, A&M plays in Alabama's division.
Yeah,
so
they're in the West.
So whether it be Florida or Alabama, but I think that's the only potential that could stand in the way. Now, all of that, it becomes a moot point if Notre Dame takes care of business in the ACC championship game, completely eliminates Clemson from the playoff picture, and then Florida can beat Alabama, and you're going to get your 2 SEC schools in there. So I think either way, the 2 conferences that are set up for best success right now of getting multiple teams into the playoff are the ACC and the SEC.
Real quick, I just thought of this, and obviously I think we're going to talk about it in the future, because who knows how long that Jim Harbaugh has at Michigan. But we talked about the Pac-12, which likely is going to be irrelevant on the stage again. What are your thoughts? I don't know how it's going to go this season. Obviously, I didn't even know USC was ranked in the top 20 before the Pac-12 started play this weekend. What do you think about Jim Harbaugh to USC? As far as, I think that's a possibility. Like, I think if Michigan gets rid of Jim Harbaugh, I think that USC may make some moves, go out and get Jim Harbaugh, who has already coached in the Pac-12, so has an idea of how to recruit a Pac-12 school. Yes, he's going from a program with big expectations to another school with big expectations, but they're different expectations. The Pac-12 hasn't been relevant really in 4 years. And he would have an opportunity to, yes, go to a organization or go to a team in USC that does have, a storied history and a big past, but also a team that is very hungry to get back to college football relevance. I had that thought yesterday. I was like, you know what? Jim Harbaugh and Michigan, even though I loved the hire at the time, probably not a great marriage ultimately in the end, for the reason of they thought Jim Harbaugh was going to finally get Michigan over the hump of beating Ohio State. He hasn't done that. And so he's likely going to be on his way out, especially if Michigan finishes like a 2-5 or something along those lines. So I thought about that yesterday, and I honestly forgot about it until now.
Yeah, I don't know. If anything, I feel like Jim Harbaugh is better suited for the NFL.
Really.
To be honest, I don't see him taking another college position. I feel like USC is going to want a proven winner. If there's going to be anybody, they need somebody that is out there. I don't know how else to put it. I honestly still believe that the two people that if Clay Helton ends up not being retained at USC for whatever reason, ultimately the two people to look at for that position are PJ Fleck out of Minnesota and Luke Fickell out of Cincinnati. Honestly, Luke Fickell is going to be on a lot of people's lists, big time programs. Just because of the job he's done at Cincinnati and also the interim job that he did at Ohio State. So, I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if Michigan comes knocking at his door and tries to get him to replace a Harbaugh if that's the direction. I mean, I don't think Michigan will ultimately part ways with Harbaugh on their doing. If anything, it's going to be Harbaugh walking away from Michigan to go back to the NFL.
Interesting. I was just curious on your take on that because I was trying to think of if Harbaugh didn't come back.
I tweeted that out. I tweeted out during that Michigan IU game. I said, "Hey, real question here: if Michigan ends up losing to IU, how long does it take essentially for Michigan to fire Jim Harbaugh?"
Yeah, I mean it's definitely on the doorstep. It seems. Question number 2. IU will finish November undefeated. B. Scott, you did your hardest. You did your darndest. You tried to talk some sense into me. But you know what? I'm going to say this is a hot take, and here's why. The Hoosiers are playing on a different level here in 2020. The defense is strong. The offense is getting the job done. They will play Michigan State this next week, and then they play at Ohio State, and then Maryland to round out November. They also face number 13 Wisconsin, which could be a spoiler game, which is followed by the bucket game. It's not going to be an easy walk the rest of the season. But like I said, IU gets the benefit of the doubt because, again, you have to get up for one game. One game is all that the coaching staff at IU has to do. They have to talk their players up for one game, and that's that Ohio State game. I mean, it's a situation where, yes, they have to go out and play and do well in all those other matchups against Maryland and Michigan State and Wisconsin and that kind of thing, but at the same time, it's a situation where they say, hey, you know what? We now control our own destiny in the Big Ten West or East. I always get confused because there's not... They're in the East?
Yeah, they're in the East.
So they control their destiny in the Big Ten East. And so I think that, if they have to get up for that one game against Ohio State in a situation that's going to be bizarre. They're going to be at Ohio State with no fans, which would normally be, I mean, if Ohio State had fans in the stands, there would be no question Ohio State rolls. But I think Indiana, for that one game, can get up and get it done. So I think IU will be, in a good position for possibly a run at the Big Ten title come the end of November.
This is a cold take. Yes, IU is playing at a different level than IU has ever played at. What's funny is that earlier you said I don't think IU can be playing at a national championship level, but they sure are playing at a Big Ten championship level. Have you not noticed who's sitting atop the Big Ten mountain right now? A team playing at a national championship level. So if you're going to knock off that team, you got to play at a national championship level.
Right, but can they do it for one game?
In the Ohio State's on a mission. They are on a legitimate...
You can say that all you want, but that doesn't mean that for one game, IU can't get up and win that game.
In years past, I may have agreed with that idea, but... Because, Ohio State may overlook IU. Okay, but have you seen the ranking in front of IU? That right there alone is not going to make Ohio State look past them this year. It's not some unranked 3-3 or 4-4 IU team. It's an undefeated top 10 team. That's like exclamation points all around it. Don't overlook, don't overlook, don't overlook.
Doesn't mean they won't.
Knows that. They know that. This is going to be, regardless, a big time game for Ohio State now. So they're not going to overlook that. I'm sorry, plain and simple. Ohio State's playing at a different level than anybody else in the country. Justin Fields has started to pull away, in my opinion, especially after how Travis Etienne performed this past weekend. Justin Fields has started to pull away from the rest of the field in the Heisman voting. He alone is playing at a totally different level. That defensive line, they don't have the Chase Young or the Nick Bosa this year, but that defensive line is scary good. It is anchored by a guy, I can't pronounce his name, Garrett something, and he got shot in the face during the offseason. And he plays defensive line. He's a defensive tackle, and he is just causing nightmares for opposing offensive lines. I mean, talk about BAMF. I mean, seriously. This dude got shot in the face in the offseason, and he's playing now. And good luck, IU. Yes, you've played at teams that really Penn State probably had the best wide receiver you faced all season long. Okay, one wide receiver. How are you going to stop Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and so on? I mean, Ohio State has the best wide receiver room in all of college football, and then their running backs, Master Teague and Trey Sermon, the transfer from Oklahoma.
So, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're saying Ohio State's on a mission. They beat Nebraska week 1, 52-17, obviously big win. They beat Penn State, the same Penn State team that IU beat, by just 13, but they're on a different national championship level. And then they beat Rutgers, obviously blew them out as well. But I'm just saying, they played that same Penn State team that IU had to, get a little help to get past by just 13. So it's not like they blew them out of the water. If they're on a mission that cannot be stopped.
I'm still saying, I mean, Penn State got some garbage time points there at the end to close it in, to be honest. I mean, Penn State could not stop Ohio State until Ohio State decided to let the foot off the gas pedal. And, I mean, you can look at the score breakdown and you'll see that. But I do not believe anybody in the Big Ten can play up to Ohio State's level for a full game, for a full 60 minutes. I just don't see it. I don't see it out of anybody. And it is disappointing that some of these other teams aren't playing as well as we thought they could, like Penn State and Michigan. But I just don't see it out of anybody. IU, Purdue, Wisconsin, it doesn't matter. I just feel like the eye test and just the stats alone are telling me Ohio State is on a different level than anybody else right now. Their quarterback is on a different level than anybody else right now. And that those wide receivers are going to be impossible to stop. Do I think IU can hang with them early on and put a scare into them? Yeah, I do. I'm not saying that IU is going to go in there and absolutely get thumped. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that I do not have the confidence in anybody to beat Ohio State right now. So that's why I think it's a cold take, because I just don't see it happening. I don't see it happening whatsoever.
I mean,
I honestly think that Purdue has a higher chance of going undefeated in November than IU does.
That's shocking, B. Scott. That's the most shocking thing I've ever.
Look at the schedule.
No, I know.
You don't have Ohio State on that schedule.
Right.
If the roles were reversed and Purdue was ranked in the top 10 and all they had to do to get to the Big Ten championship game was beat Ohio State, I would be saying the same exact thing here, because that's how strongly I feel about Ohio State right now. They are just playing at an absolutely different level than everybody else.
But yet still only beat Penn State by 13. It's fine. But no, I'm joking. I'm messing with you. So
we're going to talk about Penn State? Are you serious?
But no,
IU technically did not even beat Penn State. Michael Penix was out of bounds.
oh my gosh. But it will be interesting to watch IU the rest of this season. And I do think that at the end of the day, you will most likely be the one that's right. I just think that for what, like, IU can gas themselves up for one game, especially in some different circumstances. This year has been crazy. If there's gonna be a year that the Hoosiers can shock the world, it's gonna be 2020. So the final question. Purdue will knock off number 23 Northwestern this Saturday. I don't know. This is a flip of the coin for me. I'm gonna argue the negative because I know B. Scott will argue the affirmative. So I will go with it. This is a cold take. The Wildcats have won 5 of the last 7 this decade versus Purdue, and they had one until Purdue's win last year. Had won the last 5 against Purdue going into that matchup last year. So Northwestern hasn't allowed a second half point this season, which puts more pressure on Purdue's offense to get it going and get it going early. So I think that is a different animal in and of itself. So you have a Northwestern defense that is playing really well, combined with the fact that Northwestern has had Purdue's number. I do think that there is a chance that Northwestern does get the win. I am going to pick Northwestern. I want Purdue to win because I really would like to see a Purdue-Ohio State or Purdue-IU Big Ten championship game. But I don't know that that's going to happen. So I think that Purdue. I want Purdue to win, but I'm gonna go against my heart here and say that I think that Northwestern does end up getting the win, and continues on their path to potentially getting to the Big Ten championship game.
And this is a tough one, mostly because not knowing if Rondell is going to play, if George Karlaftis is going to play. How is this week off going to affect Purdue? Like Jeff Brom said in his press conference today, you love to get a bye week, to get healthy. But at the same time, we were playing with some rhythm, and we got to make sure we keep that rhythm going. It's still up in the air if anybody but Xander Horvath is going to play running back. If you want to beat Northwestern, you got to be able to control the ball, for one, and you can't make mistakes. You cannot make mistakes. Xander Horvath had 2 fumbles. One of them wasn't really a fumble, let's be honest. His knee was down. Everybody will tell you that. His knee was down. Wow, that sounded like a Donald Trump thing right there. But besides that, this is a tough one to predict. When the Vegas line came out, it was originally Purdue was favored by 2, but within 24 hours of that line coming out, it flipped, and now Northwestern's favored. I mean, obviously they're a ranked team. They have a little bit more success here as of late. I'm just, it's a tough. I think this is a toss-up one. I'm gonna say it's a hot take, just because the way Purdue has been playing, it just something feels different about this season for them. You just have a little bit more faith in them. I just have a little bit more faith than I normally would.
Right. I mean, they started the season off well with those 2 wins. That, I mean, we talked about at the time, they had lost to Illinois the year prior, and Iowa's not a slouch team, and those are their 2 wins, and so I felt confident with the Boilermakers even going into the game against Wisconsin. Now that said, you also could get, even though Purdue has lost to Northwestern in the past, Northwestern is ranked, you could have also gotten a situation where Purdue might have been like, okay, well, the worst is over. We didn't have to play Wisconsin this year, and that could have provided us a potential tripping up against Northwestern anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it's a hot take just because Purdue did beat Northwestern last year at Northwestern for one. It was a last-second field goal, but Purdue really it was a young team that was kind of thrown into the fire last year. I mean, it was really Aiden O'Connell's first game, and he played very, very well in that game. I just think the defense this year is a little bit different. Yeah, they're ranked near the bottom of the Big Ten in yards allowed and all that, but scoring wise, they're up there in the top 3 in the Big Ten. They're a bend but do not break defense, and that is the signature of a Bob Diaco defense: is bend but don't break. And I kind of feel like, there is familiarity there with Peyton Ramsey, obviously transferring from IU to Northwestern. The last time Peyton Ramsey played at Ross-Ade, he was sacked 5 times. And this is a mobile quarterback we're talking about here. Now, this is a different offensive line. Northwestern does have a very good, as a solid offensive line, one of the better offensive linemen in the entire country. I think he opted out, though. I'm not 100% certain. But I don't know. I feel like things are starting to align correctly for Purdue, and this is that next step. This could be this is really a make or break game, in my opinion, for the Boilermakers. If they don't win this game, Purdue fans can just sit back and go, well, all right, here we go again. But this could really help. I know it's an asterisk season, but beating a ranked Northwestern team, putting yourself firmly atop the Big Ten West, could help Purdue get over that proverbial hump and start to turn the Jeff Brom era back in the direction that everybody believed it was headed in prior to last season.
Now, before we get into kind of our final topic and wrap up the podcast for this week, I do want to remind you guys you can follow us at Crash Course FM on Twitter, Crash Course Podcast on YouTube. And remember, you can also like us on Facebook if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything like that. We do go live every Monday on the Facebook page, so you definitely want to go over and like that. And remember, you can listen every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. So one final topic before we wrap up tonight. Chase Elliott wins the 2020 NASCAR title. At 24 years old, he's the third youngest to win a title. He did win the season finale at Phoenix, led 153 laps of the scheduled 312. Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin, and Jimmy Johnson not only rounded out the top 5 in the race, but also it was the same order as the standings, which was pretty crazy. And so, it's a good, I think, change of pace. I think, at least from the standpoint of, like, yes, I'd heard of Chase Elliott before, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like every year it's, the same guys that are in contention to win the title. It's, Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski and all those kind of guys. And so it's nice to see a driver like Chase Elliott. I was always, even though I wasn't, he wasn't my favorite driver, I was always a fan of Bill Elliott, and to see him, get that win, have his son get that win, in Chase Elliott. He drove the 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports for a while, which always has a good place in my heart, being a Jeff Gordon fan. So, it was just nice to see, and I think it's a kind of a refreshing thing, that this season where, hey, for a point in time, there was the eyes of the sports world was on NASCAR, because at one point they were the only sport that was back. And so I think this was kind of a good way to kind of round out that year, as far as, I think the sport got a little bit of a refreshment as far as the sports scene is concerned.
So I love this. I was the one that told you about this anyways.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Chase Elliott fan. I love Hendrick Motorsports first and foremost. So when Elliott was tapped to replace Jeff Gordon in the 24 originally, I love the move. Couldn't be more excited. This is a guy that had to win last week at Martinsville to even get in the top 4. Ultimately, by winning that race, bumped out the best driver of the entire season in Kevin Harvick. And on Sunday, he got the proverbial pole. He got the provisional pole just based off of how they're doing things this year, how they did it post-COVID. But he failed inspection twice. Had to drop to the rear of the field to start the race. So he went from first to last and raced his way back up to first and won the race to win the championship. That was awesome, first and foremost. Second thing, your talk about, it's always the same old, same old. Here's an interesting stat I did not realize. You're right. It does always seem like, oh, it's Kevin Harvick. Oh, it's Joey Logano. Oh, it's Kyle Busch, blah, 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 blah. Hendrick Motorsports has won 13 out of the last 26 NASCAR championships.
Yeah, I mean, you have all those years with Jimmy Johnson. Um,
And you had 4 with Jeff Gordon, 1
right.
with Terry Labonte, and now Chase Elliott. So that was kind of an interesting, like more than 50% of the last championships have gone to Hendrick Motorsports.
Well, I mean, think about the drivers that have been there for Hendrick Motorsports. Kyle Busch, Terry Labonte. You've got.
You had Kyle Busch, Terry Labonte.
I was trying to go in order of number, like as far as the numbers go. You have Dale Jr.
Mark Martin.
Mark. Well, yeah, Mark Martin did drive the 5-4.
Brian Vickers.
Seniors. Yeah. Yeah. Dude, you're wiping the floor with me now, trying to remember. I used to be really good about.
I'm a Hendrick fan.
I mean, I am too. I just am not as plugged in as I used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, case in point.
I love the fact that Hendrick is bringing back the number 5 car next year, and Kyle Larson is going to be driving the number 5, so he's going to be back in NASCAR. But here's something real. Here's 2 more fun facts about this. One, today, as we all know, Bill Elliott got the nickname of Awesome Bill from Dawsonville.
Right.
From Dawsonville, Georgia. There's the Dawsonville pool hall down there where they celebrated the championship. Well, today they took Chase Elliott's winning car down to Dawsonville, Georgia, and they drove that thing through the streets of Dawsonville and had a championship parade for him. Thought that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Second thing, this is the Erie one. I don't know if I sent this to you or not.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Follow me here. The 1988 NBA champs, the Los Angeles Lakers. The 2020 NBA champs, the Los Angeles Lakers. The 1988 MLB champions, the Los Angeles Dodgers. The 2020 MLB champions, the Los Angeles Dodgers. You might be thinking, who cares? The 1988 NASCAR champion, Bill Elliott. The 2020 NASCAR champion, Chase Elliott.
That's pretty crazy.
That is crazy right there.
I
thought that was pretty cool.
That was nuts. Never would have thought of that. Like I knew that. Like, yeah, I was like, I definitely would not have put that all together. So that's incredible. So that leads us.
If I have to, I just want one more thing here.
Yeah,
if I have to make any changes to NASCAR, though, looking at the championship race, I don't know if I would have the last race in Phoenix. It's so far away. I mean, yeah, it started at 3:00, 3:30, but I love it. The ending under the lights when they had it in Homestead.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
There's something about winning that championship under the lights. A lot of people were saying that track was very hard to pass at, and they put down some grip. I don't know what the stuff is called, but stuff higher up to create a higher lane. And that was going to go away as the race went on. So that made it even harder to pass. So, I know it was still an exciting race. Don't get me wrong, especially with Chase Elliott coming from last place to first place to win it all. But maybe look at a track that is a little bit more exciting than Phoenix. Phoenix is pretty exciting, but
now could you do it in like a Vegas where you? Is that worse?
There's so many tracks that are similar. Well, I think Vegas. Or is that California that's changing? One of them's changing to a short track. But there's so many tracks similar to Vegas, like Kansas and Chicago and Michigan.
I mean, I guess you could.
To be honest, the most exciting race here recently, I mean, obviously everybody loves Talladega and whatnot, but Martinsville, that would be an awesome place to have a championship race.
Yeah.
In my opinion, or like a Richmond.
Yeah, a Richmond I'd be in favor.
Richmond would be really good. Darlington would be awesome. Talk about historical.
Yeah,
your champion named at Darlington, that would be awesome. That not that the race was bad or anything. I mean, the top 4 championship drivers were running in the top 4 pretty much all day once Chase Elliott got back up there. So it was kind of like, and that seems to happen every year. Like, really? Is there some kind of directive that goes out to everybody else that says, leave these 4 alone and you guys are all fifth?
Yes.
Seriously, it's just kind of odd, but hey, congratulations to Chase Elliott, one of the youngest to win a championship in NASCAR history. First of many, in my opinion. I think he's got a bright, bright future ahead of him. Honestly, we saw the passing of the torch yesterday at Hendrick Motorsports when Chase was celebrating his victory, and Jimmy was out there getting applauded by the crowd as well for putting a cap on his career. They pulled up next to each other and had a few words. And as Jeff Burton put it in the booth, he said, "I think we just saw the passing of the torch, not just at Hendrick Motorsports, but in NASCAR as well." And I think he's right. I think Chase Elliott has the opportunity, much like we had this debate about Joseph Newgarden.
Yeah.
Chase Elliott has an opportunity to really win several championships. Will he reach that 7 mark like Jimmy Johnson? I don't know. That's tough, especially with how deep of a field NASCAR has. I mean, like, there was 5 or 6 drivers that could have won this championship, to be honest. And especially with Hendrick, they have such young talent. They're only getting better year after year with Alex Bowman and William Byron and now Kyle Larson coming into the fold. It's going to be interesting. Next year is going to be very interesting. And I do believe there is a new chassis in the work for 2022. I do believe. So,
yeah, that brings us into our final hot or cold question, which is Chase Elliott will be the next NASCAR superstar. And quickly here, I think that's a hot take. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, he's just 24 years old. I was looking through, it's crazy because I feel like, when I was last, I mean, I guess it shows how long ago since I was really plugged into NASCAR, but I feel like, when I was plugged in, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Brad Keselowski were all the young guns, and now they're kind of, reaching the twilight of their careers. And the fact that Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, and Kyle Busch are all over 35. Now, again, like we talked about with Scott Dixon, obviously they can all race, well into their 40s if they really want to. But like you said, it reminds you of Joseph Newgarden, which, in the sense where he's held his own against the old crop, he's held his own against the new crop as well. And as far as marketability and thinking can he be a superstar, not only just in the sports world or in the NASCAR world, but also the sports world. I mean, he is son of 16-time NASCAR most popular driver Bill Elliott. So he
is also currently ranked as NASCAR's most popular driver.
So I think if you got this young guy who kind of took on the big guns here this season, I think if you're looking at NASCAR kind of getting back into that national conversation, not necessarily where it was back when I was a huge fan of NASCAR, but just as far as getting kind of some of that popularity back, I think Chase Elliott's kind of the guy that's going to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah, I agree. This is definitely a hot take. Chase Elliott not only has the ability to be the future face of NASCAR, but also be a very, very popular sports figure as well. I mean, he already was just because of his dad, let's be honest.
Right.
I think he has an opportunity to be even more successful than his dad.
Well, I mean, he's already got as many championships as him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He's already got as many. But, I know when you look at, I think what we're going to see here is these three names that are going to be battling it out over the next several years: Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, and Brad Keselowski. I mean, Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski are they're about my age in their 30s. Mm-hmm. Joey Logano is 30, so they got a long way to go, especially when you look at how long some of these drivers are. I mean, Kevin Harvick is racing phenomenally, and he's up in his 40s. He's like the Scott Dixon.
Yeah.
Not the same championship level, but as far as success into his 40s. Kyle Busch. I think Kyle Busch he's one of those drivers. I think he's going to get even better with age. I think he's going to take this year and really run with it next year. Mm-hmm. In the fact that, he had one win this year. He did not even, it was a disaster of a year for him. But I've always thought that Kyle Busch is a driver that drives recklessly, and he's proven that he's not so much that anymore. As he's gotten older, that has changed. He used to be one of those drivers that he just drove the thing until the wheels fell off. And a lot of times that's what happens. His equipment would just fail because he just drove it too hard. And we're starting to see that start to change with him as he gets older, which is a good thing. So, but I still think Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, and Chase Elliott, as of right now, are the true future of NASCAR and are going to be those guys that are going to be battling for championships year in and year out. And it's going to be really exciting to watch those three continue on in their careers.
Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. You can like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Crash Course Podcast. And remember, you can listen every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the Crash Course Podcast can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. And B. Scott, where can they find you, bud?
You can always find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87. That's really mostly where you can find me. And I'm getting back into the Twitter game much, much more. As you can, if you follow me, you'll notice. Highlight of my Twitter recently is my 11-month-old son broke off the wings of a Connor Daly diecast car. Tweeted a picture of it, tagged Connor Daly in it, and he liked it. So
there you go. That's always a good feeling.
We're moving up in the Twitter world.
Yeah.
On my account. We're moving up.
That's always a good feeling. Well, and we have a good feeling about next week's podcast.